What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. And if you're joining on YouTube, my setting probably looks a little bit different than normal. So on the road this week, got the road.
He's
podcast
on location.
I'm on location. I'm in Big 12 country right now. So in Kansas City,
Hook
home
'em.
of the Hook 'em Horns, home of the Big 12 basketball tournament, the National Basketball Hall of Fame. You know, Kansas University is not far. So, big Jayhawks guy.
Maybe Lance Leipold be walking around somewhere,
Maybe. You
get
never
some barbecue
know.
with him. I don't know.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Some burnt ends. So we can do it all. But tonight, it's not about the Big 12. We're talking Big 10 West. We took a 1 week break from our conference picks and previews. We're back with the Big 10 West. And this is a big one. I think this has been one of the more competitive divisions in football, along with the ACC Coastal, one of my favorite divisions in football, and one of my favorite conferences in football. So, Dan, I'm excited to dive in and talk through these Big 10 West teams.
I like it because we really get to discern who is going to be the sacrificial lamb offered to Ohio State in Indianapolis. So, we'll see what happens.
You're exactly right, because that's exactly what it is. It's like Alabama and the SEC. It's who's going to go be sacrificed to the Crimson Tide. Maybe.
Yep.
We haven't gotten there yet, but
yeah,
we might be picking Ole Miss to win the West. You never know.
Yeah. Or Texas A&M. Just kidding.
Or Mississippi. Just kidding. Wisconsin. We're going to start at the top of the Big 10 West, and it starts with Wisconsin. Now, to the casual fan, you might think, well, yeah, this is a division Wisconsin wins every year, but the team that's won 2 out of the last 3, the Northwestern Wildcats. Wisconsin would like to get back to their ways of winning the Big 10 West year in and year out after a hot start last year. COVID kind of wrecked their season a little bit, but Wisconsin's hoping to jump back in with the year 2 quarterback. I mean, I'm not even going to say his name. I'm going to save it for you. That's your boy.
Yeah, he's a year 2 quarterback, but it's his 3rd year in the system. That's Graham Mertz. Definitely looking forward to what he can provide and potentially changing what this offense is all about. So weird year last year for everybody, but especially Big Ten. And, if you could slice it up, I mean, Wisconsin had one of the weirder years with just all of their COVID situations, missing games, postponing games, rescheduling, and just overall missing players going into COVID protocol. Obviously, Big Ten was one of the toughest with their protocols. I think it was 21 days rather than the standard 14 days that everybody else had. So they wanted to have an abundance of caution. Well, that left the Badgers, reeling a little bit. A 4-3 year, definitely not what we've come to expect. But then again, we haven't really expected 7 games to be played in a season in a long time. So the team looks pretty solid. 7 returning on offense as starters, 8 defensively. That defense was really strong last year. We only got limited sample size, obviously, but I really feel strongly that they returning this year, the 8 players that are coming back, that's going to be kind of the difference. Yes, we mentioned Graham Mertz on offense at quarterback. Alongside him, you've got 3 out of 5 offensive linemen coming back. The leading rusher in Jalen Berger, 5 yards of carry last year. But, something we don't really talk about a whole lot with Wisconsin is recruiting. And this was their highest rated recruiting class, I think, ever. Yeah. So it was number 16, which, a lot of people turn their nose up at that. But really, for a team like this that just has such a good process and such a good development, I mean, the better the players that you can bring in, I mean, it really can move them kind of up the chain pretty quickly. Obviously, they're still not even within shouting distance of an Ohio State as far as territory, but as far as their peers in the Big Ten West, that kind of puts them up there. And for a team that we expect to be the class of the division, that's always big. So yeah, Graham Mertz, starting quarterback, Kendrick Pryor and Shamiri Dyke at receiver. They definitely expect big things from them. Jake Ferguson, the tight end, returning. He's returning for his senior year. He was the leading receiver last year, both yards and catches, and touchdowns. So he's the guy to watch out for. I think he's going to have a big impact along the linebacking core. Leo Chenal, he's actually returning second leading tackler and leading sack guy returning. So definitely expect, it was a short season last year. He had 3 sacks. So from an inside linebacker position, that's, pretty stout. So definitely want to see what he can do in this more normal year.
Wisconsin has won the Big Ten West 4 out of the last 7 seasons. So I didn't give enough credit with, I had to lead with the Northwestern 2 out of the last 3, but Wisconsin has won the Big Ten West 4 out of the last 7 seasons. But they haven't won the conference since 2012. So it's been a while. They're hungry for it. You and I both agree that we think they've got the quarterback to do it. The quarterback's it's always been the most position in football, but it's become exponentially the most important position in football as of recent. Wisconsin, we're going to know a lot about the rest of their season in the first month of the season. In their first 4 games, they play Penn State at home, Eastern Michigan, they play Notre Dame in Chicago, and they play Michigan at home. Now, it's a tough, 3 out of the first 4 games, very, very tough. But you get 3 of the first 4 games at home, and then Notre Dame's a neutral site. So none of those games you have to play on the road. But that's a first month where I could see them going 1-3. I could also see them going 4-0. Right now, Wisconsin's win total is set at 9.5, and we're going just above that Vegas win total at 10. So we got Wisconsin going 10-2. We actually have them starting that season 3-1 in those first 4 games, which I think is a great way to start the season, to go 3-1 in those games. They get a bye before Notre Dame. So we have Wisconsin winning that game and going on to win the Big Ten West. And we'll see if they have, like you said, they're playing, we got to play in Ohio State. So can they get over the hump and beat Ohio State and win the conference for the first time since 2012? 2 years ago, they were close. They were up at halftime against Ohio State. Ohio State came out and just beat them down the second half. I wonder, and like you mentioned, previously with their recruiting ceiling, they were hitting their head on the ceiling. But this is a team that, they just had their best class ever. If they can recruit right at that 15 to 20 range, this is one of those teams that could really capitalize on an expanded college football playoff and set themselves up for long-term success there, which will only help their recruiting. But for this season, Wisconsin 10-2, Big Ten West champs. We'll see in a few weeks. So we're going to pick them to beat Ohio State. Let's move on to second in the division, which we have as the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa, you could argue, has been the most consistent team in the Big Ten West over the last decade. They're always sitting right there between 8 and 10 wins. And they've just been a super good football team under Kurt Ferentz. Now, some off-the-field stuff happening the past couple off seasons that they've had to deal with. It looks like Ferentz has come out looking really good and that the culture's still there, gotten rid of the people he needs to get rid of. But Iowa, they want to get back to the Big Ten championship. They have Big Ten West championship hopes. How are we looking at the Hawkeyes?
Yeah, so this is a team that, they returned just a little bit on offense. They got 5 returning starters on offense. They've got 7 on defense, but that defense really returns a lot of role players that played a lot last year. And that was a team that, if I'm not mistaken, did they finish the year as S&P, or they're coming into this year, they're SP plus number 1 team defensively. So that's something that we definitely take stock in. They had a good year last year defensively. We expect that to take a step forward. That's really where they're going to be carried this year. They do return Tyler Goodson at quarterback coming back this year. I think that he's going to be, Spencer Petras at quarterback coming back this year. Tyler Goodson's the running back. Get thrown off on these magazines when there's actually a fullback listed in the starting lineup. Wisconsin and Iowa, the only two that I've actually seen that are listed that way. Shout out to old school football. I appreciate it. But Tyler
Shout
Goodson
out to the
coming back
Midwest.
as the lead, right? As the lead running back. So only, 8 games last year, he had 762 yards rushing, 5.3 yards a carry, 7 touchdowns. So definitely a great year last year from Goodson. Petras had a solid season at quarterback. Definitely need to take a step forward. But he's the kind of quarterback that you can win with this defense. So when you've got this defense, if you've got a guy who's just gonna run the offense and not turn the ball over a whole lot, that's something that he can do. Now, I guess I'm saying that he had 5 interceptions last year in 8 games, but if he takes a step forward this year and really can improve in that area, I definitely expect him to really show us something. They only have 2 returning offensive line starters, and then as far as receiving targets, Sam Laporta at tight end, he's their leading pass catcher coming back. Definitely want to see him take a step forward and see if that's something that can manifest itself over the course of a season. Iowa's been known for their tight ends, so he's definitely got some big shoes to fill as far as potentially getting drafted this year. So he needs to have a big season.
Iowa, so their win total set at 8.5. We are just going to go just under that at 8-4 for Iowa, which seems pretty on brand for Iowa, right? Like when you think Iowa, you think 8-4. Now this is a team that last won the Big Ten West in 2015, and they haven't broken through since then. But over the last 6 seasons, they are tied for the 3rd most wins in the Big Ten, tied with Penn State over just total wins over the last 6 seasons. So again, a program that's been super consistent and a super consistently really good Big Ten West team. This season is really going to depend on 2 things for me: quarterback play. I was reading an article on their 24/7 site, and a lot of those people just feel like quarterback will decide whether Iowa goes 10-2 or like 6-6. So if quarterback plays really good and he stays healthy all season, this is a team that can go 10-2. If it's not good consistently or he gets injured, like it could go off the rails a little bit. So we're going to split the difference and go 8-4 and play it safe. Similar to Wisconsin, they have a couple tough opening games. So they open up with Indiana at home. Then they have probably the biggest Cyhawk game of all time. And that I don't say that lightly, because Iowa State's never been as good as they are. Iowa's been a really good, consistently good brand for a long time, but Iowa State's never been on this level. And so in Iowa State, that's the last thing Matt Campbell really hasn't done that I think they're capable of, is beating Iowa. And so this is like Iowa State trying to get over the hump, and Iowa has the opportunity to put them right back in their place with this game. But we are picking the Cyclones to win that game. We mentioned that on the Big 12 pod. But hey, I'm pumped for the biggest Cyhawk game of all time.
Last time they played, which was 2 years ago, Jacob, that was I think we had the lightning delay. So they started the game, had a lightning delay, started to play again, and I think had another lightning delay. And that game was like a 2:00 kick, and I think it ended at like 8:30 at night or 9:00. It was like weird. So I think Iowa did win because Iowa State under Matt Campbell still has not beaten Iowa. Like you said, I believe it was like 16-12 or something stupid like that. It was a crazy score. So definitely want to see if Iowa can muddy up the waters again for Iowa State, or if it's going to be, Iowa State's here to break through. That'll be fun to watch. But obviously we have Iowa State taking that one. So before we go any further, I want to tell you guys where to find us on social media. This is going to be the best way to interact with the show, help make the show your own, let your voice be heard, but definitely want to get you following us on all platforms. So at the Extra Point Pod on both Instagram and Facebook. Go to the link tree there, and you can find us on YouTube. When you get there, like and subscribe us. You can go through and hit the notifications bar. You'll get all the content shot right to you. And then, when you get there, go to Apple Podcasts. You can leave a 5-star review. That helps us to get recommended. And comment. We love interactions on the videos on YouTube. Comment. Tell us what we know. Tell us what we don't know. If you're a diehard fan and you feel like we're just reading, the Cliff Notes and you need to let us know what's really going on, please do. If there's something we're missing or if we said something incorrectly, get on us. Or if you really like content, tell us that. But we're good with anything. We just want you to let us know how we're doing.
Or if we made a pick that you just don't like Texas going 10-2, feel free to let us know. We take it to heart. All the comments that were made about that. Anyway, moving on with, the 2 out of the last 3 years, the defending Big Ten West champion, Northwestern Wildcats. And this is a team that, again, that outside of that 3-9 season, that was the anomaly, was that season. And Pat Fitzgerald has shown that he's one of the best coaches in the country with this program. And so this is a team that we're going to continue to believe in. What are your thoughts on the Wildcats?
Yeah, so you really had to reel me in when we were first picking a lot of their games. I was like, no, I don't think they're going to be good. But, it's one of these things where there was that one bad year, and every other year, Pat Fitzgerald really has this team ready to play. He is one of the better coaches out there. He's been looked at for bigger jobs, and he's turned them down because, he's alumni of Northwestern. So, they're always just under him. They're a tough, hard-nosed team, especially defensively. That defensive, especially defensive back, it seems like they keep putting guys in the NFL or having guys, at top of the conference and things like that, all Americans. So Hunter Johnson last year came in and a couple of years ago was a 5-star, and that was all well and good. Last year, Peyton Ramsey comes in as a transfer from Indiana at quarterback, and he played well. He kind of showed, what this team can be with competent quarterback play. I don't know if that's what they're about to get in Ryan Hielinski, but he's transferring in from South Carolina. He was highly touted as a recruit. He had some good flashes at South Carolina, could never really put it all together because of injuries and coaching changes. This is really a move for him to really get into a better situation for himself. Hunter Johnson's still on the team. He's a senior. He's the backup, but it looks like this is going to be Ryan Hielinski's team. That's why he's transferring in. He was a former 4-star, so still a pretty high profile QB. So interested to see kind of how that dynamic goes. Offensively, they're only returning 3 starters. Defensively, they're returning 4 starters. One guy who's not counted on as a starter is running back Cam Porter, but he is the leading returning rusher, and he led the team in rushing last year. Had 5 touchdowns, over 300 yards, and again, it was that shortened season, only 7 games. So definitely want to see if he can take a step forward and really, take more of this offense on his shoulders with a new quarterback coming in. But honestly, a lot of what we're basing our picks on is the coaching staff and is their proven record of being able to develop talent and to replace guys who've gone pro. And, that's definitely what they're going to have to do.
This is one of the biggest gaps in win total and what we've picked of any of our picks. I understand it. So the win total is a 6.5, and that I totally get. We're buying a little bit of Northwestern stock here. So we'll write this one down. This will be one of the ones where we will come back and hold ourselves accountable, good or bad. We will either brag about it or tell you how wrong we were about it at the end of the season. But
right,
we are picking Northwestern to go 9-3. Now, here's my first red flag with picking Northwestern to go 9-3. Out of 127 teams, Northwestern ranks 126th in returning production. So this is one of the youngest Northwestern teams they've had. But if you talk to people around the program, they also believe it might be the most talented team they've had, even though they're young. So typically a team like Northwestern gets really good when they've like gotten in a bunch of 3-star guys and developed them. And then by the time they're juniors and seniors, they're pretty good. But they think this is one of the most talented teams they've had. And it sets up well for them because of the schedule. The schedule starts very easy and gets more difficult as the season goes on. And so if they can get some momentum, get these young guys some reps, which is what we're buying into, then you can have some momentum going into the second half of the season as the schedule gets more difficult. So, and out of the East, they draw Rutgers, Michigan, and Michigan State. And so you only draw, one of the big boys out of the East. And again, the toughest games, Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan, they all come after the bye in the second half of the season. So we're picking Northwestern to go 9-3. Ryan Hielinski, I've seen him play in person. Kid's got an arm. And so in the right system, I think he can be really, really good. Like you said, he's transferred in to be the starter. He will be the difference in a team like Northwestern being a 500 team and a team going 9-3. So we're buying a little bit of Hielinski stock as well and picking Northwestern to go 9-3.
I was going to say another guy I feel like we at least have to mention, and Brandon Joseph, the safety, he's one of those guys that, we really have to highlight because it seems like Northwestern keeps putting these guys in the NFL, cornerbacks usually specifically, but Brandon Joseph here, he's a sophomore, but he had 6 interceptions last year in that short season. 6 interceptions is amazing for a full season. So the fact that they played 8 games last year and he had 6 picks, that's definitely something to keep in mind. He seems like a ball hawk, definitely someone who's probably going to be projected in some of the earlier rounds in the NFL draft when his time comes. So keep an eye out for him. He is one of those few returning starters and their leading interceptions guy.
Now a team that people are pretty polarized about, and that is the Nebraska Cornhuskers. So 4th in the division, we are picking Nebraska. This kind of shocked me a little bit. This is year 4 of Scott Frost. We are 4 years removed from the UCF national title season. And Frost was hired, and looking back on it, everyone called this a home run hire. There was no one who thought this is a bad hire, including us. We were like, he was the hottest coach. Alma mater's Nebraska. For him to come home was incredible. We're now into year 4. I remember that first season, people picked him to win the Big Ten West in his first year. And ever since then, it went off the rails, and it hasn't gotten back. So it's year 4. It's time to see some results. Will Scott Frost be let go at the end of the season? I don't know. I think a better question, will he be on the hot seat at the end of the season? What are our thoughts on Nebraska?
Yeah, so Nebraska is one of these teams where we were definitely, like you said, Jacob, it seemed like a home run hire when they made the hire. Okay, it just seemed like things were clicking. He was going to get everything back on track. And then it was like all of a sudden after year 1, when they showed no evidence of being turned around, everybody jumped on the bandwagon saying that they were going to turn it around. You and I wanted to pump the brakes. And so I feel like in a way you and I have been, we've been correct, first of all, not that we're wishing despair on any specific team or anything like that, but it just has seemed, I almost feel like I've been overly negative with them because it's almost like I'm like ready for them to just show me, prove it to me before I will, put my name on the line saying that I think they're going to be great. It's a mixed bag. It's tough. I think Scott Frost is a competent coach. I think there's a moment where he may have bitten off more than he could chew right away. I think that he was one of those guys that, coming back to your alma mater, you want to do it justice, you want to do it right. And I think to a certain extent, you expect things to happen a certain way. And if it just doesn't happen, it might not I don't know. I think that his expectations were kind of jaded when he came in. So I think that this is something where he's got to get this thing turned around. So we got 3 returning starters on offense. I would actually say that this is supposed to be 4 because Adrian Martinez, for some reason, is not listed as a returning starter. I think because Luke McCaffrey split time with him. But Adrian Martinez at quarterback, coming back for another year, was also not only their leading passer last year, was their leading rusher, had 521 yards rushing in those 8 games that they played, 7 rushing touchdowns. He had 4 passing touchdowns. So he's I mean, this really comes down to if he has a good season, we expect him to kind of lead the charge for them. They've got some pretty high profile transfers. I say high profile, it's mostly because they're coming from big teams. So Tyreek Johnson coming as a cornerback, a former 4-star cornerback coming from Ohio State, transferring in to Nebraska. Marquise Stepp, a former 4-star running back coming from USC, transferring into Nebraska, as well as Oliver Martin, former 4-star wide receiver from Iowa, transferring in. So that's some talent to really come in. Obviously, this last recruiting class that they had was ranked number 20 in the nation. So, solid, especially for the Big Ten West. Definitely going to be able to compete with this. Top player is Thomas Fedone, the tight end. So we'll see what this translates to. Defensively, they do return 9 starters on defense, and we do expect them to be pretty strong on that side of the ball. It's just going to be, can they put it all together? And with their schedule, can they manage it? Because that's kind of where they're going to get nipped because of what they draw from the East. So we'll have to see if they can manage their schedule, make it to a bowl game, and really start to turn this thing around.
Scott Frost made some pretty big coaching changes his first 3 years, and each one had a noticeable impact. This past offseason, he made no coaching changes, which it's like we talked about with Ohio State. It tells me that you believe in the changes you've made. They believe their roster's in the best spot it's been in since he got there. This is the year to show that you've turned the corner. And here's what's tough about Nebraska. Their win total set at 6, and we think they will turn a corner. But like you said, the problem is the schedule is not going to allow for the results in the win-loss column. Outside of the Big Ten West, they draw Ohio State, Michigan, and Oklahoma. So, I mean, 2 of the top 4 or 5 teams, 3 teams potentially in the country.
Right.
And also Michigan outside of your normal Big Ten West schedule. So that's tough. It's a team that, you're sitting here saying they could go 8-4 and you throw on Ohio State and Oklahoma on the schedule. So
right.
We're picking Nebraska to go 6-6, but we think this team's going to look noticeably different in year 4 of Scott Frost, which if I'm Nebraska, give him some time because, again, this schedule is tough. You're not going to compete with Oklahoma this year. You're not going to compete with Ohio State this year. That doesn't mean it's time to let him go. So let him buy some time. But, hey, what if they beat one of those teams? What if they beat Michigan? What if they – Ohio State's playing at Nebraska this year. I'm not sniffing an upset there. But what if? It could happen. But –
you're starting to sound like JP from Angels in the Outfield.
That's right.
It could happen.
All
hey,
right.
Roger.
Nebraska. After Nebraska, we've got the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Or as Joe Biden calls them, Minnesota.
That's right. You got to scream it. Minnesota, a team coming off of a very weird 2020 season. Again, one of those teams that COVID affected a ton. Their win total is set at 7. I said last year PJ Fleck was going to be a great head coach at Auburn. To be fair, if they had had a good season, it could have happened. He might have even interviewed for the job, but here he is at Minnesota again. What's our expectation for the Gophers?
Yeah, man, we, especially going into last year, we were really high on what they did the year before, with just how strong they had that 2019 season. Coming into 2020, we were really high on them, really low on Michigan. And I remember that game, and we were just like, what are we missing? Because this is a slam dunk pick, Minnesota. And I just remember feeling so dumb after that game because Michigan blew the doors off. So definitely a humbling experience. This is a team that I do think overall is a solid program. PJ Fleck, is a good coach. You start adding some of these things together, you would expect them to just have a good year. They're gonna have to kind of manage themselves going through. Not going to have any favors in that first game, but 9 returning starters on offense. Tanner Morgan back at quarterback. Not that great of a year last year after having really stellar year the year before. So really want to see if 2019 was the real Tanner Morgan or if 2020, the inconsistency that we saw is going to continue. Muhammad Ibrahim had a great year last year. I mean, over 1,000 yards rushing, over 5 yards a carry, 15 touchdowns though in that shortened season. So just a 7-game season. I mean, he was extremely productive. He's back for his junior campaign, so want to see what he's able to do in that backfield. Just returning, 4 out of 5 starters on the offensive line, very important. Defensively, they've got 6 starters back. Boye Mayfi, 4.5 sacks returning as a linebacker, defensive end. So he's a guy that I'm kind of like looking at. And then their top 2 returning tacklers are back from last year as well. So definitely want to see if they can take a step forward as a program, maybe raise the floor. Because last year was definitely uninspiring after, the year they had in 2019.
Tanner Morgan has looked completely different after losing 2 guys who are going to be catching passes on Sundays. I feel like we've seen this before. We talk about it. It's the most recent thing is the Jake Fromm effect, right? You lose all your receivers, and then we see who you really are.
Right.
But defensively, Minnesota's season is going to be, really 2 hinges it's going to swing on is quarterback play and run defense, which was abysmal last year. And overall defensively, you cannot give up 6.9 yards per play and expect to have a good defense. So Minnesota's run offense should be one of the nation's best, but they got to clean stuff up on defense if they want to sniff the Big Ten West. So if they can get inside 5.5 yards per play, decrease that by a yard this season, that would be super impressive on defense. Schedule, you open up with Ohio State. We've said Ohio State's going undefeated, so tough.
Right.
Other teams out of the East that they get Indiana, and they also get Maryland. So 2 teams that, again, we're pretty high on going into.
Yeah, those are tough teams.
But we're picking Minnesota to go 7-5, 4-5 in the division to, same record in the division as Nebraska. We had Nebraska winning that head-to-head matchup. So 7-5 for Minnesota. I think this is about where, PJ Fleck has raised the floor with Minnesota, which is super important. I think this is where they're going to sit from now on, 7-5 to 8-4. And if I'm a Minnesota fan, that's awesome. So that's great for Minnesota to raise the floor and be competing for that, like the top 3 spot in the Big Ten West.
Yeah.
I feel like you can't ask for much more from Minnesota.
I certainly wouldn't.
Let's move on to a 6th team in the division, the Purdue Boilermakers. So this is Jeff Brom's 5th year at Purdue. And, a couple seasons ago, I guess, it's been a few years now, they beat Ohio State. Everyone's high on them, and they've been not good since. Over-under set at 5 wins. how are we feeling about Purdue?
Yeah, it's tough losing Rondale Moore. Obviously he didn't play a ton last year, but it just wasn't, him getting drafted, leaving, losing him. But David Bell really was a solid wide receiver for them down the stretch last year. 8 touchdowns, over 600 yards in that short season. I know I feel like I keep having to remind everybody it's a short season in the Big Ten, but it was even shorter season than everybody else. I guess when we get to the Pac-12, it'll be really short. But yeah, 2-4. So they only had 6 games last year. So 625 yards. I mean, he had 100 yards in every game. So that's significant. I do think he's a big time playmaker. I think that Xander Horvath in the backfield, he's one of their top 3 returning receivers. He's a senior at running back. And then he had, 400 rushing yards himself. So definitely kind of that, dual threat out of the backfield. Jack Plummer looks like he's the returning starter at quarterback. That's what we expect. But him and Aiden O'Connell split time last year, and they're both back. So, we'll see if they continue to run between the two of them. It is nice to know that if one gets hurt, you've got the other one. They both have experience, but, you'd like to have the guy. So we'll see if they have that in Jack Plummer. Milton Wright, I do expect to have a good season as a receiver, a returning receiver. He's a junior this year. They have 7 returning on offense, 7 on defense. That defense, could take a step forward. They weren't very good last year, but they returned their second leading tackler in Jalen Alexander, and their top sack guy, which he had 2 sacks, George Kalarfitz. So, do what you need to do, but we don't expect a whole lot from Purdue this year.
Purdue's defensive and offensive styles are similar in that they live and die with big plays. So on offense, they're either hitting an explosive play or they're getting nothing. And a lot of that is due to lack of experience on the line of scrimmage, which when you're playing the Big Ten West against teams like Wisconsin and Iowa, and then if you look at their schedule, they got Ohio State and Indiana out of the East. They get Notre Dame out of conference. They get Oregon State out of conference, which is no joke if you're Purdue. And same thing defensively. They're going to make some big plays defensively. They're going to take risks on defense with their style of play. So they're going to get some sacks. They're going to get some interceptions. They're also going to give up big plays in the process when they take those risks. But I think the biggest pitfall for them is going to be lack of experience on both sides of the line of scrimmage, which, again, will not do them well in the Big Ten West. So we're not expecting much from Purdue this year. We got to go in 4-8, 2-7 in conference, and their best shot is going to be going with Plummer, the more mobile option at quarterback, which will fit that style of offense a lot better. Last and least in the division, sorry at Tom Fornelli, but the Illinois Fighting Illini, a team that, hey, 2 years ago upset Wisconsin. So, how they've fallen since year one. This is the only first-year head coach in the Big Ten West, Brett Bielema, first year at the program, rather. But, hey, it should be really fun when Illinois' homecoming game is Wisconsin, where Brett Bielema was the coach for several seasons. But for Illinois, the win total for them is set at 3.5. So Vegas isn't expecting much either. So, Daniel, thoughts on Illinois?
Yeah, so they return 8 starters on offense and 7 on defense. Bielema is he's a good coach, and especially Big Ten, that's what he knows well. So I do expect him to, I think, be successful over the long haul. It's going to be tough the first year just because it's tough for any first-year coach in what he's trying to do. But, hey, at least you're returning a starting quarterback who played well when called upon last year. I say well relative to what the other guys gave him. So, but 3 touchdowns, no picks for Brandon Peters. He had some moments last year that he looked good, but it was a tough year last year for them. Chase Brown coming back at running back, 540 yards in those 8 games that they played. So definitely a positive there. Isaiah Williams, the backup quarterback, was their second leading rusher. So you might see him mixed in some wrinkles of that. But they got really 2 good tight ends in Daniel Barker and Luke Forward. Definitely expect there to be a lot of 2 tight end sets on the field. I think that's probably when they're at their best, because Daniel Barker is actually their leading returning receiver. He had 268 yards last year in that short season, a couple touchdowns. So expect him to make an impact, as well as Luke Forward. That's really all I have for them. At least Owen Carney Jr., 5 sacks last year in the short season. So he'll be back at defensive end.
Illinois has a decently experienced roster. Honestly, a decently experienced head coach. But it's hard to make predictions in year one of a transition. And I feel like anyone who picks a big jump in year one of a head coach, it's
Right.
luck. You're almost always safer betting on a tough first year with a new head coach than you are on the other side. Now, that's not to say year 2 can't be different. I think the transfer portal has opened up for rebuilds to go a lot faster and smoother, but
Right.
2-10 for Illinois, I don't feel great about that. I think this could be like a 4-8 kind of team.
Right.
But again, I'll take my chances with a safe bet of betting on year 1 being kind of tough for a new head coach. So,
well, 2 wins that we gave them, or 2 wins that they had last year were Rutgers and Nebraska. And I mean, we do expect Nebraska to be better than they were. So
yeah.
We'll see. It's
and
tough.
Rutgers.
Yeah, and Rutgers. So that's tough. Everybody's improving. Not everybody can, not everybody can be good at once.
Right.
And so, it's one of those things where someone's got to lose some games. It looks like it's probably Illinois.
We will be back next week with the Pac-12 North heading out west, and then we'll do the Pac-12 South, followed by the SEC East and West. We're getting to our meat. We're getting to the good stuff. So you can follow him on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is Daniel. I am Jacob. See ya.